Hello and welcome to the new British campaign for Victory at Sea Pacific. This is going to be a guide and introduction to what's going on. Starting out, you're going to be very on the back foot with almost no ships and basically all of the Philippines captured. One of the first things you want to do is around Singapore. You have a battleship, a cruiser, and an aircraft carrier task force that you can use to defend it, and you're about to get about 30 Japanese vessels, mostly destroyers and cruisers, coming in piecemeal on this bearing. You do have the ability to successfully beat them, but it's going to probably take a lot of time and be a pain. One of the first things you want to do is to upgrade both of those capital ships, because the King George V gets 12 local AA and 5 long range AA to deal with all the planes that are about to be coming your way. And your carrier, once it finally arrives, is going to almost double its flight deck size. Although, because of the planes you're working with in this campaign, that's not going to be a huge deal. Until you unlock the Hurricane, you have this, which has 0 dogfight strength. So all it's there to do is look around, and the Fairy Swordfish isn't much better. I recommend keeping them in bomber mode because they're going to get obliterated, and this will at least let you sort of damage installations. The only other ships bigger than a corvette that you have are 2 cruisers out here, which do have the ability to help you fight for and claim the Ellis Islands and Gilbert Islands. The only thing that Japan has in this area is 2 old light cruisers that you'll be able to beat. And if you can take your corvettes to eventually, at a speed of 16 knots, hold these and keep them for a couple months until Japan does anything to try and take them. Another big thing to keep in mind as the campaign is starting is all these ports have planes and you have no competent fighters, so anything except these starting little gunboats right here is going to get instantly deleted. Other things that Japan is going to do early in the game is completely annihilate the United States. The US does not know anything about retreat or a defensive posture of any sort. Every single ship they have is about to charge west, stopping for no one, waiting for no destroyer escorts to be built. These are the battleships that are damaged from Pearl. Those are going to be over here as soon as they can get there. And with that, Japan is pretty easily going to take Komandorsky, Midway, Johnston Island, and the US is going to be just sitting there, not being conquered and not doing much. Currently, the British have a smaller selection of ships than any of the other 2 nations available. You see that they have about 7 ships smaller than destroyers available, and basically none of them are worth building ever. These later versions of corvettes come with hedgehogs. These are gun and torpedo boats. These things up here just can be around, moving with depth charges on the cheap, but their prices are just like twice as high as they could be, because for the price of 2.5 of these, you could just build a destroyer. This is only 10 war bonds cheaper than an actual destroyer, and your destroyers are pretty decent. You have the J, K, and N classes, which are identical, except for the names, which each come with 6 guns, 4 in the front, 10 torpedoes, depth charges. Soon you'll unlock the Tribal class, which once you unlock is going to be your definitive destroyer, with 8 guns and 4 torpedoes. The trade-off isn't worth going back because they're the same price, and you almost never use, let alone hit with, torpedoes on anything but a sub. The V class are 50 war bonds as well. Never build them unless they get bumped down to a lower price. They're not worth it. They're inferior in every way. You'll also have the Beetle classes of cruisers, starting with the first group, then the second group, then the Bologna class, which are all dependent on this 5.25-inch gun. The first group are okay to start building once you get them. As soon as you unlock the second group, however, just build that. It has 10 guns, and all of these are basically inferior to a Leander class, which has the same amount of guns, but in 6-inch caliber instead. These are passable AA escorts and about the best you're going to get. The Leander class light cruiser is unlocked by default. It is decent, and it has a spotter plane, which is pretty amazing. We'll get to that later. Later, you'll unlock the Fiji and Cylon class. You basically just want the Fiji. It's actually the fightingest cruiser you get. There's no heavy cruisers available, but 12 6-inch guns, as you may have seen from the 15-gun American light cruisers, is plenty to brawl it out with even heavy cruisers, especially the smelly, quick-to-die Furitaka and Alba classes that the Japanese might use. The Cylon classes are faster. You don't really have much that would want it faster, except maybe your Implacable class carriers, which are pretty good. What you saw earlier was the Illustrious class, which have fleet carrier speed, but come with only 8 flights. Fortunately, for a 95 upgrade, you can go to 13 flights, which is still the worst fleet carrier in the game. Is it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. But it's a lot better than nothing, especially considering they only have to pay for 253-day war bonds worth of building time. Whereas if you were to build a 300, just spend it all up front, you would have to use the same 82 days as the superior Implacable class carrier. These are even faster, and the only reason you might actually build the Cylon class. They have a competent number of flights at 20, which is actually fairly normal. They're fairly resilient. They have fairly decent AA. The only reason that they're not great is that the planes you can actually put on them are pretty darn bad. Over time, you'll unlock a couple classes of escort carrier. The Ruler class is garbage. It's slow, it builds fast, it has basically no flights. The Colossus class light carrier is something on the edge of a fleet carrier with a very small amount of flights, but more than your average flat top. It also has 25 knots, so it's kind of stuck in the middle between unable to decide what it wants to do. But the reason you're going to want to build a lot of these is that all your home ports that can build full-on capital ships are over in the southeast of Australia and New Zealand. Over here in Singapore, after they're unlocked, you can build the Colossus class, which is not a perfect substitute for a fleet carrier, but it's darn close and a lot easier than building Implacables over here and sending them all the way over, especially if you're still struggling to gain control of most of the Philippines and Dutch East Indies. You also saw submarines, which are better than their speed would have you believe. They are absolutely snail-like, horrible movers. The fastest one you get is 100 war bonds for 15.5 knots. The saving grace of them is that submarine combat has improved since launch, and they actually keep very high speeds while submerged. They get about 12 knots, so they lose almost no speed, which makes them good enough to sink a couple battleships that happen to run them over. Now the planes. The planes are a mixed bag is generous. The first planes you're going to start out with is the Barracuda, is the Swordfish, this Fulmar, and not you, the Supermarine Walrus. The Fulmar is I don't think I've ever seen these things shoot down anything because they've got 0 dogfight strength. I I cannot justify using these instead of just another swordfish with some bombs to attack the platform, be it a base or a ship carrier. It's sending the things you need to shoot down. That's how horrible it is. I'm gonna get rid of it right now. That's how bad it is. Later on, you'll unlock an upgraded pair in another fighter, the Hawker Hurricane, with a dogfight strength of 2 and no tough attribute. This is less combat stats than the Wildcat, and it takes you a couple XP blocks to get it. So don't expect anything great from your fighters, but because of the way the game's AI manages, or rather doesn't manage, its fighter combat and escorts, these will help you keep strike planes from killing your carriers and ships. So these are finally going to be worth something. The Barracuda is a competent strike plane. It's got relatively low-ish speed. It can do dive bombers and torpedo bombing loadouts. It's your only competent strike plane. The only thing that's really bad about it is something you're going to notice on a lot of these planes. It's got 596 nautical mile combat range. You get 455 in the Swordfish, 678 on the useless Fulmar. Hawker Hurricane is 521. And that's not enough to get much of anywhere. If we pull up something like this, that's not going to go island to island. And that's fairly better range than the Avenger on the American carriers at the start of the campaign. And if you tried that, you know that those really don't work very well. And that's going to be kind of the theme for all your carrier aircraft. The one great aircraft that they have, the only one, is a Supermarine Walrus, which on paper is really slow, 521 range, no dogfight strength, it's large, and it's just, a worse Catalina. It has bombers, ASW bombers, spotters. The thing that makes this amazing is that you can put this as a catapult plane. That's right. If we go over here to some cruisers, you guys. These have walruses and they're spotter planes like you would expect, but you can go into your menus while at sea and change them to bombers and ASW bombers. So you can have, in the middle of the ocean, away from islands or near ones that have had their airfields destroyed, access to anti-submarine warfare bombers like you would at a basic port or even a minor port. And that versatility is amazing. It doesn't quite make up for the lack of competent strike planes from the good bases, but that is something that you're absolutely going to want to abuse as you're struggling to get your foothold in the campaign early on. The last plane you unlock is the Short Sunderland for 30 war bonds, and it's the only plane you get that actually has a range. At 1,500 nautical miles, it's on par with your average flying boats. It didn't get a spotter system. It can't be equipped as a catapult plane. But it does have the ASW loadout, a regular bombing loadout, and they have competent range. So from most bases, you can usually reach another one to help assist with your ships so that they don't get onto buggery on their way there. It's quite useful because a lot of what you're going to be doing, more than you do in the US or Japanese campaign, is island hopping around the Dutch East Indies and Philippines, where you will be going kind of slow enough to get your airfields up, and they're kind of close enough that you can use this in concentrated bombing campaigns to make sure that all the bases you're showing up to invade are already on low health. So those are really the only two planes you want to worry about. Something to get over the fact that they are very bad planes individually with generally low bomber counts is to just group up a lot of carriers together in at least two if you're going to want to engage an enemy carrier group of one. The more you have, the better. And until you unlock the Hawker Hurricane, just fill them up with the best bombers you have. Sending Swordfish in torpedo mode is great against one destroyer alone, but anything much bigger than that is going to shoot them down before they can drop their torps. So just do yourself a favor and use the bomber mode. Once you get the Barracuda, you'll get a bit of extra range and better damage, enough to justify spending the upgrade cost. And only once you get the Hurricane will you ever want to equip even a single fighter. Because of the power of the Supermarine Walrus, you do not need to focus as much on always having some DDs in your task forces, because while there will be plenty of Japanese submarines around, you can use the Walruses on the cruiser escort for very effective anti-submarine patrols.